This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a renowned actor, director, writer, producer, artist, and humanitarian who's perhaps best known for his portrayal of Detective Dave Starsky on the iconic TV series Starsky and Hutch, for which he won numerous awards, including a Photoplay Award, a Bravo Otto Award, and a TV Land Award. He's also appeared in many other iconic TV shows, including Love is a Splendored Thing, The Waltons, The Rockford Files, The Mentalist, Grace and Frankie, Ray Donovan, and many more. He also starred in some terrific TV movies and miniseries, including Princess Daisy, Trapped Beneath the Sea, The Great Houdini, Jealousy, Attack on Fear, and Never Let Her Go, Ladies' Night, and many more. On the big screen, you saw him in Fiddler on the Roof, Butterflies Are Free, Something's Gotta Give, Phobia, and Kazaam, which he also wrote, produced, and directed. He also directed The Running Man, The Cutting Edge, and The Air Up There. And he's directed many episodes of classic TV shows like Starsky and Hutch, The Agency, Judging Amy, Third Watch, Las Vegas, Criminal Minds, and Miami Vice, for which he was nominated for an Emmy Award and a Directors Guild of America Award. On Broadway, he was in The Man in the Glass Booth and Butterflies Are Free, and he's been in dozens of theatrical productions, including Luther, Peter Pan, Aladdin, 12 Angry Men, The Lady's Not for Burning, Henry IV, Richard III, and many more. Our guest has also written a novel entitled Crystalia and the Source of Light, which is a beautiful story of courage, forgiveness, self-discovery, and ultimately finding love, light, and fulfillment. In recent years, he's also become a highly respected artist. And most importantly, he has spent many decades honoring the memory of his beloved wife, Elizabeth, and daughter, Ariel, through his monumentally important work with the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation, for which he has received a whole slew of prestigious honors and lifetime achievement awards for his extraordinary humanitarianism. I'm delighted and deeply honored to welcome Paul Michael Glaser to our show. Paul, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. That's a lovely introduction. So much. I got very tired listening to it.
Well, it was a pleasure researching your career. And I noticed in my research that you developed an interest in theater and acting at a very early age, and you did something unusual in your junior year at Tulane University in New Orleans. You took a 6-month leave of absence to go to London to study theater. What made you decide to do that?
In all honesty, what it was I was doing too much at school. I was taking 21 hours of classes. I was in a bunch of major theater productions. About 3 weeks before the end of the semester, maybe a little longer than that, I turned to one of my classmates, and I turned to him and I said, "I can't do this anymore." And I just had a nervous breakdown. I just I OD'd on busyness, so I withdrew. So then we decided, my family decided, I could take a break. My father had a friend who was friends with Laurier Lister. Laurier Lister was the head of the National Theatre in England. They accepted me over there. I came over, and they arranged for me to audit classes at Lambda and Rada. And Max announced to me that he was going to coach me himself. He taught me. He said, I'm going to teach you something that you're not going to be able to use for 40 years. Of course, as soon as I came back, the first role I played was Tajamuro in Rashomon, and I tried to use what he told me, and he was right. So I stayed over there, and I went to classes, and I worked with Max, and then by accident, total accident, one day I walked into Simpson's department store to buy some shirts. And I walked in, and I walked to the tie counter, and I said to this girl, I said, "Excuse me, can you tell me where the ties are?" And she said, "Second floor." I said, "Second floor?" I said, that's not a British accent. Where are you from? New York. Oh, okay. Our cousin was opening a new kind of club. It was called the Ad Lib Club. Did I want to go? I said, sure. So I picked him up that night in a taxi, and we went down to Soho. And we go into this office building. We go up to the fourth floor. The elevator door opens, and the music is just banging in your ears, and there are lights and everything. It was the first discotheque, the very first one. So I walk in, and sitting at a banquette on the right along the wall were the Beatles. Christine Keeler and Stuart Whitman were on the floor with Rudolf Nureyev, and it was just an amazing scene. We sat down, and this Frenchman comes over, and turns out he knows at the time, I had a brother-in-law who was an aspiring French movie director. I was directing a film in Paris, and he knew him. So we start talking and everything and drinking, and before you know it, we're loading each other into taxis and say goodnight and swearing friendship forever, exchanging phone numbers. The next morning he called me, he says, you want to have some breakfast? I said, sure. So he comes and picks me up and he takes me over to his friend's house to have breakfast. And we walk in, and sitting on the bed with a huge model of a set, of a movie set, is Roman Polanski. He's directing Repulsion with Catherine Deneuve. Before I know it, I'm in London, and I'm on one hand studying with and having access to all this amazing theater with, Olivier was doing Vanya, and he was doing Othello, and he was doing the Recruiting Officer, and then Endgame had just opened up there with Pat McGee and Jackie McGowan, and it was just, the theater was going nuts. And the whole disco world had just opened up. I found myself, being exposed to these two different crowds of people. It was very amazing, and after about 4 months there, I decided Max said to me, he said, you have to go back and finish your education. I said, oh no, yeah, that's what you gotta do. I said, okay. So I ended up going back to Tulane and getting my degree in about 3 semesters, and then went on from there.
Now, you've done a lot of theater over the years, and you once said in an interview that you try to make every performance a rehearsal. What did you mean by that?
What I meant was that I learned something. I was doing the summer stock in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It was at the Harvard Loeb Drama Center, and we were doing two plays in repertory. We were doing Crime and Punishment and Ladies Not for Burning. Well, Ladies Not for Burning, I was playing Thomas Mendip, who's the leading role, and put me in a pair of tights, and I'm all over the place. So I didn't do a really good job on that one. I didn't really know what I was doing, or the other play was Crime and Punishment. The director was a nice man from MIT, of all places. Didn't really have a clue what he was doing. He'd rewritten part of the play. Well, I'm standing there, opening night, behind the curtain, and I'm standing there and I'm saying, and I hear the audience out there, and I'm going, what the hell am I going to do? What am I going to do? Nobody knows none of us know what we're doing. And that's when I said to myself, I'm just going to rehearse. I'm just going to treat it as a rehearsal and allow myself to explore whatever it is I want to explore or that comes up like that. That became a very important thing for me, because in any medium, you don't want to concentrate on the result. You want to concentrate on the process. The result is out of your control. When you think that you have some control, then that's where you get really nervous and scared and screw up. I began relating to the acting in that way, and that came over into my directing and writing and everything else.
Now, Paul, you played the director Ralph Stanton in Butterflies Are Free on Broadway for 7 months, and then you played him in the movie. What's it like to transform a stage performance into a screen performance?
I didn't have a clue what the difference was, but I learned over time. But at the time, I didn't know what I was doing. Milt Kazaam was the director, and he offered me the role, and of course I took it. And I just did what I had to do, what I'd done on the stage, and I didn't think of anything of the difference. You know, it's a much more intimate medium. The camera is right there. It's watching you. It's telling the truth all the time. So you can't lie in front of the camera. Maybe you can, but it'll show it. Sometimes we don't know the actor's not being honest, but the camera sees it. And when I watched myself on camera, I could see it. I didn't like it. So I stopped watching myself on camera.
Well, let me ask you about playing Perchik in the movie Fiddler on the Roof. When that movie first came out, you said that you were surprised you got the part because you thought you were too old to play Perchik. Were you surprised when Norman Jewison cast you in the movie?
Yeah, I was at the time I was doing Butterflies Are Free on Broadway, and I was doing a soap opera during the day. So I was doing double duty, and I got a phone call saying that Norm Jewison wanted to meet me. And so, not that he knew me, but it was the casting director was sending me over there. And I knocked on his door at the Sherry Netherlands, and he opened the door and he says, "Who are you?" And I said, at the time I was Michael Glaser because I had to change my name because of the Actors Equity. I said, "I'm Michael Glaser." And he said, "What are you here for?" I said, "To read for Project." He looked at me and said, "You're too old for the role." I said, "That's what I said." So he said he had time to kill. So I said, "Oh, come on in, and we'll read, whatever." So I came in and I read for him, and then I danced him around the suite a little bit, and he ended up sending me to California to do a screen test, and I ended up getting the role.
Well, he made a great decision because that was a really, really great performance in a wonderful movie. Now, of course, you've been immortalized for your work in Starsky and Hutch, and I'm sure you would agree that a major part of the show's success is the on screen chemistry between you and David Soul, which was really pure magic. Could you feel that chemistry from the very beginning, Paul, or did you have to work at it?
No, we had a really interesting dynamic, the two of us. We were aware of each other. I first met David. I did a talent showcase for agents, and he was doing a scene with Michael Margotta, and that's where we met. Over the years, our paths would cross. You know, I'd be Universal doing a thing, and he'd be at Universal doing Seven Brides or whatever, and our paths kept crossing and crossing. And then, you know, when Starsky and Hutch was sent to me to audition, I was avoiding series. I didn't want to do a series. The last thing I wanted to do. But I figured I needed to. I learned a lot, and I wanted to. I needed new footage on myself. I wanted to see how little I could do in front of the camera. You know, doing nothing, just being there. I figured, oh, okay, I'll go. I'll read. So when I read for the part, and they cast me, and then the next day I saw David again. We were at Aaron Spelling's office, and that was that.
Well, you know, from the moment Starsky and Hutch hit the airwaves as a TV movie, even before the series started, you became a household name and a major superstar globally. And you were definitely a sex symbol, Paul. I'm sure you know that. How did you adjust to that instant fame?
Oh, it was the worst. It was the worst. In all honesty, it freaked me out because all of a sudden I realized that I made a deal with the devil. I tell the story. I've told the story before. When I was in New York and I got called to meet Norman Jewison, at that point in time, I and the other actors would meet at Brennan's or or Joe Allen's, and we'd sit and drink our unemployment checks and whatever. And we'd always say, "Oh, Hollywood, yeah, I wouldn't live there. Oh, I'll go out there. I'll do a gig, but I'm not. No, thank you. I'm an artist, man. I want to be an artist. I don't want to be a star." The joke I tell on myself is that the very first thing I did when Norman Jewison announced he wanted to fly me to California to screen test was I went to Bally's shoe store and I bought a pair of white loafers. And that visited me, that event replayed in my mind again and again, because what I mean by that is that a large part of me, much larger than I was willing to admit, was invested in the fantasy that I could fulfill myself by becoming famous, that I could fulfill my whatever my voids were, my emptiness, my who am I, what am I about,
But
And
did you think that you would feel validated by being famous?
I think subconsciously I did,
Why did it make you feel that way when you finally got there?
because it doesn't happen. It doesn't has nothing to do with being famous. And so then what happens is you become famous, and whatever you have done that has gotten you that attention isn't enough. It's like a lie. You say, well, I got to do better. I got to do better. I got to do better. And so you're always trying to do better. And you feel like you're being celebrated for something that's not true. That's not who you really are, And that carried me through the show, and it carried me through my directing career. I directed 5 films. I wanted to be an auteur, but I was not emotionally mature enough to take what were some really nice ideas that I had to the screen.
You were very vocal back in the days of Starsky and Hutch that you were unhappy with the scripts and the level of violence on the show. Did David Soul agree with you about that?
Yeah, David agreed. He didn't. We were about voicing our concerns in different ways. I was much more argumentative, more confrontive, me versus them. You know, we'd go to the Spelling and Goldberg, and and we'd say, "This is what we think we need to do on the show," and they'd say, "Oh yes, yes, yes," and then they ignore it.
But when you look back, don't you think the violence on Starsky and Hutch is pretty mild compared to what you see now?
Well, yeah, I mean, compared to what you see now, it's wall to wall violence. But at that time, violence still existed in a gratuitous way. And our philosophy, David's and my philosophy, was the violence should come out of the drama, could come out of the conflict. And like with a well orchestrated symphony, the violence, that's the clash of the cymbals, the drums, that's the climax. And so it has to come out of something, and it has to be warranted.
Well, it seems to me that you didn't really identify with being Starsky because he was such a sexy, cool guy, and that was the image you had. But deep down, you didn't really feel like that.
No, I didn't.
Did you feel more like Perchik?
No, I think that, look at I before I did Fiddler on the Roof, I was doing a soap opera called Love is a Many Splendid Thing. I was playing a doctor who would cook Bunsen sausages on his Bunsen burner, and he'd woo the nurses, and he was anti-establishment. And I became aware early on, although I didn't articulate it completely to myself, but I did become aware in retrospect that I was developing a persona, a public persona. And that persona developed through all my work. So when I read Starsky and Hutch, it became a vehicle for that persona. It became an opportunity for me to take that persona and put him in that situation. A guy who's against the establishment, who is vulnerable, like the puppy dog that runs into the glass door, but also is able to express passion and anger and all of that. So it was a persona that I'd created.
But you weren't totally comfortable with it. And I think I'm thinking back, we've had Harry Hamlin on the show, we had Peter Gallagher on the show. Both of them said that being extremely good looking can be a double-edged sword in this business because of the way you get typecast. Did you feel that way?
Well, no, I think that Starsky, as I played him, really worked. I wasn't happy with my batting average. David would always kid about the amount of takes that I would ask. I said, I want another take. I want another take. He said, Paulie, what do we do? I said, I want to get it right. I want to get it right. So that was one thing. The other thing was that the writing, oftentimes in the series, it suffers, especially after the first season. People start to write gimmicks and tricks and like that. So we were always battling that. It's funny, you should say the thing about good looks. Because I remember I was directing, his name just went out of my head. Real good looking guy. Maybe it's just as good and well that I don't remember his name. And I said to him at one point, I said, you know what your problem is? I said, you're too good looking. You're too good looking. I didn't experience myself as good looking. I didn't experience myself. I didn't think I was bad looking. I didn't think I was ugly, but I didn't think I was this romantic lead that was all of a sudden being ballyhooed all over the place. No, I didn't. I didn't feel that way.
That's amazing because that's exactly the image you had with women. So, do you watch much television nowadays, Paul?
Not a lot, like 1883 and 1923, and I watch a little bit.
Well, I got to say, one of my all time favorite TV movies was in 1976. You played the legendary escape artist Harry Houdini in the TV movie The Great Houdini. How did you prepare for that role?
Well, I read everything I could find about him. I don't know how I prepared for it.
Were you happy with how it turned out?
Well, I was, I was pleased that people liked it. For me, it was a TV movie. It wasn't a feature film, and I was still invested in exploring characters on the big screen. And so for me, I did the best I could, but it wasn't the large canvas I wanted it to be.
I think you should watch it again. You'll be surprised at how really good it stands up.
I wouldn't differ with you. I find that usually when I do happen to see some of the old work, I go, "Oh, that's pretty good."
You know, another one in 2003, you played Diane Keaton's ex husband in Something's Gotta Give with Jack Nicholson. What was it like making that movie? Did you have fun with them?
Well, Jack, I didn't wasn't very communicative, but I loved Diane. I absolutely loved her. I was so shocked when she passed. I actually, this is in the same vein. I'm telling this story about me, but I came out of my trailer after lunch, and she was walking by with Amanda, and said, "Hi." I said, "Hi. How are you doing?" I said, "Oh man, I hated what I did this morning. I hated it, and yeah." And she looked at me and she said, "Isn't that funny? I feel that way every day."
He said that?
She said that. No.
What do you think
So,
she meant by that?
well, we're our own worst critics, and we don't have a lot of objectivity to it about ourselves, you know. So we're always struggling against, and it's I think part of our ability to communicate with people is our commitment to struggle against that, and in spite of that, do the best we can.
Do you think it's a little bit of imposter syndrome?
No, I don't. Well, maybe. I don't know. I
Well,
don't
I
know.
say that because you give me the impression that you never really understood why you were so incredibly popular. It wasn't just your looks, it was the charisma, it was the authenticity, it was the warmth, the sincerity.
I think I am. I do understand it in retrospect, and I think what I was just trying to define for both of us was that there's a struggle that goes on. The struggle of trying to be there, be true, be honest, be whatever it is you're trying to be, right?
Like in the
And
moment.
and in the moment and honest with the camera. I used to always say, the director would go, "Okay, call the roll." Okay, and you go action, and I look into the camera and I'd say hi, because that was that was the most terrifying thing in the world, because the camera was just sitting there looking at you, and you're trying to tell the truth, and sometimes you're not telling the truth, whatever. But I think that my commitment to do the best I could do with all the mishigas that I have as a person between me and that design, my struggle. I shared my struggle. I was very real about my struggle. I've always been very real about it. I think that is what communicates to people when they watch my work.
Yes, I think that's what resonates. And it's fascinating to me that you don't like to watch yourself on screen because if you don't see the finished product, it's hard for you to understand what all the fuss is about.
Well, I've seen enough of me to know that when I'm good, I'm really good. And when I'm bad, I'm really bad.
Well, one of the things you were really good in 2019, you guest starred on Grace and Frankie. You played Leo, an old boyfriend of Lily Tomlin's. What was it like working with Lily and Jane?
Well, Lily was terrific. Lily was great. And I hadn't met her before. And I really enjoyed working with her. Jane, I'd known socially in that whole world of AIDS and all of that. But I didn't have a lot to play with her. I acted mainly with Lily, and I really enjoyed her a lot. She was delightful. They had a read through before they began the filming. In the read through, everyone was laughing at every line. Oh, this is trouble. They're all kind of like patting themselves on the back and feeling, really confident and super and everything. And so after the read through, I went up to the producer and I said, "Can I ask you something?" And she said, "What?" I said, "I don't quite understand where this character's coming from or where he's going to, and if you could just share with me how you see this character so I can play him that way." It was the wrong thing to say. Oh,
Why?
because inside her mind, I could see the tape beginning. Oh, you're a thinking actor. Oh, you're thinking. I don't like actors that think.
Why? I wonder.
Well,
That's not supposed to be a good thing.
well, but when you think, you ask questions. And when you ask questions, you are working in the area of I don't know, of having to ask yourself these questions and ask your instincts and find your way. That's the magic of all of this is that we see people trying to find something in a very vulnerable way.
Well, what you were
I,
trying to find is the truth.
yeah, I was trying to find. I wanted to see. I wanted to have an idea of what they wanted, but she was not forthcoming, and so I just said, "Okay, well, that's part of the reality, and I'll deal with that." In a funny kind of way, it was kind of freeing because I just did what I wanted to do, and I enjoyed Lily.
You know what
But
that tells me? That they were really working in a bubble where they created this atmosphere that everything's wonderful, it's all funny, it's all great, and they don't want anybody questioning anything.
yeah, that was basically the Lily Jane show, and they were already a success, so they're walking around being a success, and God bless them, they were successful. But then you become kind of complacent, and you just keep repeating the same tricks over and over again. And Hollywood, not Hollywood, success. Success doesn't want you to ask questions. It doesn't want you to continue to explore. It wants you to produce the same thing that was so successful.
So if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, what they don't understand is that in the act of creating, what you come up with, what you discover, and what surprises you is the things that make it a success. It's the act of discovery. It's the act of questioning and making a discovery that the audience reacts to. It's not, oh, I'm going to smile here, or I'm going to do this here, or I'm going to do that there. It's living in the unknown and finding yourself, finding. So, in the language of TV production, the tendency is to want to repeat. It's like I watched the show 1883. First season was really good, really good. And then the second season, I started to notice that the energy was falling down, and people were playing the attitude that they thought the character was supposed to have instead of discovering the attitude and dealing with it. And that's a subtle difference, but it's an important difference because that's what you're always trying to do as the artist is trying to create it as if for the first time, you
Well,
know?
when we had Robbie Benson on the show, another actor like you who became a very prodigious director of television, Robbie said he stopped directing TV shows when he realized that the producers only cared about speed and efficiency and saving money and not the quality of the work. Did you find the same thing?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I was directing a Judging Amy, and the opening scene of the piece was there's Amy and this other actor walking down a corridor talking. It was, exposition and whatever. And I thought, well, how do you do that and make it interesting? How do you do that and get the audience to lean forward on their seats, to get closer to try to understand, to get involved? So I put the camera on their backs and I made sure that they turned to each other as often as possible so we felt their face, but it was forcing us to listen to what they were saying, which was important to set up the drama, the piece. One of the producers was on the set, and he said, "I really think you should cover that and give me some shot on the front and the side and everything like that." And I said, "I don't." And I'd been directing features, and so I was talked into directing an episode of television, and Joe Stern was a friend. So I said, "Sure, I'll do it." And I said, "I don't think so. I don't think I should cover it. I think it's got more power that way." "Well, I think you should." "No, I'm sorry, I don't." So then I get a phone call from one of the writer producers. "Who do you think you are? You're the director. You're there to shoot it and get it done in time." And then later in the day, Joe called me and said, "You really, you really put your foot in it here." I said, "Well, that's how I feel." And
Well,
so,
now I see why you haven't done a lot of directing in recent years. But I want to say, Paul, for those of us who lived through the AIDS epidemic, you will always be our hero for your advocacy in combating HIV. And a lot of people may not know that in 1989, you directed the public service announcement about AIDS that President Reagan finally agreed to make with your beloved wife, Elizabeth, whom we lost in 1994. Can you share any memories of President Reagan?
he was very amenable. He was very pleasant. I think he was at a point in his career where he got along to get along. He was very nice. It was really no big thing. I'd set up one shot, and I told him about the shot, and I said, "We'll do it until you're comfortable." And we shot it, and that was it. It was just the camera moving in on him. It's no big thing, you know.
While your work with the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation is legendary, I know that global resources for combating AIDS are at the lowest level in decades. How are things going with the foundation?
Foundation's in a lot of trouble. Some years ago, the foundation, when I became chairman of the board, the foundation decided to take a different direction. They got an offer from, I guess it was Bill Gates, for 14 million or something to disseminate information and medicines and the things that our researchers had uncovered and discovered. And so I had a problem with that because as soon as you took money from someone like that to do that, you were changing your mission statement and you were giving up your ability to do research. And the mission statement of the foundation was research, training, training people to do research in 7-year cycles. They'd be paid and they'd work together and they'd collaborate. And advocacy, to advocate for research, to advocate for those hard dollars that are so difficult to get your hands on. I had, along with Phil Pizzo, who was the dean of Stanford Medical School at the time, we had taken an idea that Elizabeth had. She had come up with an idea to have one hospital that would do interdisciplinary research on a bunch of diseases and take care of kids that way. When I spoke to the scientists, I'd ask them, have you learned anything about cancer from your work on AIDS? Yes, we have. Is it published? No, it isn't. And so Phil and I came up with the idea that we're really interested to do research on pediatric diseases and let the research teach you about the different diseases. So you're not narrowing your focus and saying, I just want to concentrate on AIDS. I want to see what cancer can tell me about AIDS, what AIDS can tell me about cancer. And to that end, have researchers working with a very wide perspective. And in this process of what we called interdisciplinary research, where people collaborated and shared their collaboration. And we got 5 universities involved for the first one. And now it's going to be, if that worked, then there'd be 5 more over here and 5 more over here. And eventually it would look like Buckminster Fuller's geodesic dome. And it seemed like it was the future of medicine. And I think it was. And that's what's happened now. But the board at the foundation they weren't as motivated as Elizabeth was. And they were concerned about how you could raise the money. And so they chose to take money that was offered. And in doing so, they ended up changing the mission statement of the foundation and became an arm of the government, because the government said, well, this foundation is an amazing foundation, which it was. You're doing amazing work. Here's money. Work on this, work on that. But the ability to raise money to do research was the key, and to train researchers how to work and work together. That was the key, and that was gone. So I stepped down from the foundation, and then the rest is history.
Well, I've got to say that the work that you and Elizabeth did for the foundation was groundbreaking. It was very meaningful to everyone whose lives were touched or potentially touched by HIV, and you deserve a lot of credit for the advocacy you've done. Paul, you said something very interesting in an interview about those early years of your life. You said that finding people who are passionate about what they do is not easy because people do not easily communicate their passions. But in the theater and the arts, passion is the fuel that makes it all go. And I think from this interview, this conversation, I see that your passion came from a journey of self-discovery, of trying to manage your own personality, your own gifts, your own deficits, and also your desire to contribute something meaningful to the world. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to sit down with me and talk with me about who Paul Michael Glaser really is. You are someone who's made a real difference on multiple levels, as well as an artist. You've been a very, very active artist in recent years. Thank you for all the great performances. Thank you for your incredible creativity, for making such a huge contribution in the fight against AIDS. And of course, thank you so much for taking the time to appear on our show, Paul.
It's my pleasure, Harvey. I've enjoyed this interview a lot. My problem with interviews historically has always been that I could never communicate what I thought was so important to communicate, which is this whole idea of being creative. People often say, well, he's the creative type. She's the creative type. No, we're all potentially creative. It's our willingness to ask questions, to go into the unknown and discover and find whatever it is, whatever your interest is. But when you're willing to do that and acknowledge the fear that comes with it, then that's where passion gets unleashed. That's where you make your discoveries, and that's where you affect yourself and everyone around you.
Well, I think that today in this interview, you really did get an opportunity to show us what that passion is, where it comes from, what its purpose is, and what you feel is important in life. And I thank you so much for doing that for us.
Well, I thank you, Harvey.
Our guest has been the amazing one and only Paul Michael Glaser. His book, Crystalia and the Source of Light, is available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. For more information about Mr. Glaser, please visit his official website, paulmichaelglaser.org. To see and purchase his art, please go to pmglazerart.com. And to see all the clothing and accessories, please go to dudleyrd.com. And don't forget, we are still fighting the battle against HIV and AIDS. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time. Thank you to my producers, Steve Silver, my managers, Rick Marcelli and Robin Bragg Marcelli of the Marcelli Company in Hollywood, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my editor, Isaiah Sharalampidis, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.